now to look at our helminth parasites. Our adults here are going to be large multicellular animals. They mate and produce fertilized eggs that hatch, and the larvae mature in several stages to become adults. Sometimes the sexes separate, or you can have hermaphroditic stages where you have both sexes in the same organism. Adulthood and mating are going to happen in the definitive host, which is the host in which the sexual reproduction of a parasite takes place. The larva develops in the intermediate host, which is the host that's normally used by the parasite in the course of its life cycle, and it may multiply asexually but not sexually here. A transport host has no parasitic development, and this is a list of the human or helminth pathogens. You may be familiar with some of them. A lot of them, you notice, it's spread by fecal pollution. You may have heard of pinworms and hookworms and the trichina worm from pork. You may have heard of filariasis. Flukes are also included in the helminth pathogens, and then tapeworms. Now there are 4 different helminth life cycles. Cycle A, the worm develops in the intestine and the egg is released with the feces into the environment, and then they are ingested by a new host and they hatch in the intestines. In cycle B, again, the worms mature in the intestine and the eggs are released with the feces. Then the larva hatches and develops in the environment, and it penetrates the skin like hookworms do when you walk barefooted. In cycle C, again, the adult matures in the intestine, the eggs are released into the environment, and then grazing animals will eat the eggs, and this makes them the intermediate host. Then the larval forms in cyst in their tissue, and then humans, the definitive host, eat that infected animal flesh. Cycle D, the eggs are released from the human. The humans are the definitive host, and the way they were infected is through ingestion or direct penetration by the larval phase. Now, the pathology comes because the worms feed on and migrate through the tissues, because there's an accumulation of the worms and the worm products. To diagnose, you look at the eosinophil count, and how many eggs, larvae, and adult worms are in the feces, and do biopsies, look at sputum, urine, and blood. You're going to receive antihelminthic drugs that will inhibit the worm's movement, his metabolic processes, keep him from holding position, and it acts locally in the intestine where they are. Now, nematodes or roundworms are the most abundant of the animal groups, and you have more infestations of these. Most of them are free-living in the soil and in fresh water. Around 200 of these are parasitic, and 50 species infect humans. These are elongated cylindrical worms. They have protective cuticles. They have circular muscles, a complete digestive tract, and separate sexes. And we divide these into intestinal nematodes and tissue nematodes. The intestinal nematodes develop some in the intestine. The tissue nematodes are going to spend their larval and adult phases in some of the soft tissues that are not the intestines, the other soft tissues. Ascaris lumbricoides is a large intestinal roundworm, and most often is found in the southeastern United States. It's indigenous to humans. It spends its larval and adult stages in humans, and it releases the embryonic eggs in the feces, and it's spread to other humans that are exposed to contaminated objects, food, and drink. Then the ingested eggs hatch into the larvae that burrow into the intestine and enter circulation, and they travel to the lungs and pharynx, and then you re-swallow them. Adults can make up to 200,000 eggs per day. They retain their motility. They do not attach, so they move around. And you can have severe inflammatory reactions as they migrate through your tissues. If you have a lot of them, it can retard physical and mental development. Humans become infected by which stage of the pinworm's life cycle? And that's the egg stage.